Hello, I'm Dr. Nidhi Gupta, pediatric endocrinologist and digital wellness coach in Nashville, Tennessee. Welcome to Inspinar. On my show today, I have Heath Wilson. Heath and his co-founder, Joey, started Aro to help families, help parents address their relationship with their phones. Heath, welcome to Inspinar.
Thank you so much for having me. I loved the introduction there. I don't know that I've seen it before. I've heard it before, but that was the first time for me to see it. So that was great.
Great, awesome. So, Heath, tell us, how did your personal struggle with screens lead to the idea of Aro? And tell us a little bit more about Aro.
Yeah, well, let me back up a few years. So I'm an entrepreneur, have been an entrepreneur all my life, and like a lot of entrepreneurs, I kind of got wrapped up in the life of being an entrepreneur, staying busy, feeling important. Um, so let me tell you a couple stories along the way. I've got 4 kids now. My 2 oldest are 17s. They're about off to college, but when one of them was 5, they came home from school. My son did, and they do these projects in elementary school where you kind of fill in the blanks. And one of the questions was, "What do you want to give your dad for Christmas?" And his answer was, "I want to give him the gift of family time." And for a fifth grader to have that perspective of the thing that was missing, in my life and his life was honestly a bit of a gut punch. So that story happened several years later. I'm out to dinner with my wife, and I'm just in the busiest point of my entrepreneurial journey, and I was just frustrated with our lack of connection. And normally I would have my phone up on the table when we're having dinner on quote unquote date night, but this night I actually gave it to her and I said, "Hey, take this thing, put it in your purse, and let's just talk." And I mentioned that because at that moment I kind of recognized the power of having it out of sight and out of mind, because you would have thought I'd given her a new car or had told her we were going on a trip to Europe. I mean, the look of surprise and amazement and excitement that she gave me at that moment was kind of a catalytic moment for me to say, wow, this thing has really gotten in the way of the relationships that are most important to me. And to your point early in the show, the fact that I had actually developed a relationship with a thing was the most disturbing part of that journey of mine of kind of self-awareness. So Aro, I mean, Aro was born out of, I like to tell people Aro was born out of my failures. And, along the way I had 4 kids again, and I started to look at the future through their eyes and think, wow, if they do what dad does, then this is not going to work out too well. So I called Joey one day, actually texted Joey just to make it a bit more ironic. And I said, "Hey, I've got this idea. Let's go solve this for our families." Right. And at the time I had moved on from my last business. So I had some time and resources to dig into it. And the further we got into it, the further we realized, wow, every family is struggling with this. Screen time is probably the number one battle across most families. And if you'd asked me that 10 years ago, I would have laughed. I would have said it would be the typical drug, sex, or alcohol. But that's not the case. And I've got 4 teenagers now, and screen time remains, even in the line of work that I do, screen time remains the number one tension point in our house and across pretty much every house that I know of.
That is so true. Screen time remains the number one tension point across most families. What has often left me surprised is that families are feeling powerless. They feel that they have to give in to screen time. They have to give in to the peer pressure of
Mm.
having screens for themselves and for their children. So, what are some gloomy aspects of screen time or smartphone use that you have been noticing in children, in families, and in adults around you?
Well, look, Jonathan Haidt just wrote a book about the anxious generation, and he highlighted, the challenges that teenagers in particular are having. And you mentioned this peer pressure. This he calls this collective action problem where, this is the only network, social media in particular, where you're harmed if you're in the network and you're harmed if you're out of the network, right? You're harmed if you're in the network for all the reasons we know of in terms of it, increased screen time and anxiety and loneliness and suicidal ideation. And if you're out of the network, you're out of the loop and those same things occur. So it's kind of a vicious cycle with regards to social media itself. But these devices, as amazing as they are, and by the way, we're very pro technology. This is my second technology company. So we believe that, there is technology is a way to solve our technology captivation. But we have just grown very dependent to them. We talk about relationships. We've developed a relationship with a thing, right? And we haven't had a relationship with the thing since we were a child, right? Whether it was a blanket or a pacifier or a teddy bear, but for some reason, all of us, right, as adults, have somehow developed a relationship with this rectangle. And to my knowledge, it's the only thing we have in our life that we actually have a relationship with. I have a beautiful old vintage Bronco that I love, Ford Bronco SUV, but I don't go sit in it for 5 minutes and just, marvel at the interior. I just don't go start it for the heck of it. Like, it's just the fact that we pull these things out at any moment's notice and we've just become so attached to them. It's just so out of the ordinary. And, I'm a little bit older, my guest than most, but we're the generation that were the guinea pigs of trying to figure this out, both as adults, as parents, and then with our kids. So the data is pretty overwhelmingly negative for kids in particular. I think what's going to actually come to light over the next few years is this parent-child interaction, data set. So we like to say that we are raising a generation of kids who are looking into the back of a screen instead of their parents' eyes. And we actually won't know the impact of that lack of connection for many, many years. But what we do know is when your son or daughter doesn't feel connected to their parent, they look for connection somewhere else, right? And maybe it's the phone, maybe it's social media, maybe it's peers with bad ideas. So we're just missing an opportunity as parents to really put this wonderful device aside. Again, it has plenty of utility, but in the moments that matter, we're missing an opportunity to focus on those things that we say are most important, those people that we say are most important.
We are raising a generation of kids who are looking at the back of a screen instead of looking in the eyes of their parents. And at this time, it might be too early to predict what isolation that might lead to in the future. Wow.
I think so. And I would also suggest that, or be so bold to suggest that it also crushes vulnerability. So we talk a lot about, being able to recognize cues and bids for connection, particularly from, your spouse, your partner, or your children. And all it takes is that screen getting in the way of one, maybe you don't even see it because the screen's in your face, but two, if that connection is there. Let's say my 17-year-old daughter, as a good example, is struggling with something with friends or with boyfriend or who knows, college decision. If she reaches out to me, verbally, non-verbally, to have a discussion on that front, and instead I look down at my phone, it just kills that moment of vulnerability. And it doesn't just kill that moment, it kills all moments going forward because I've just inserted something into that relationship that's unnatural. So her willingness to open up, her willingness to share with me, her willingness to ask dad those hard questions or to involve me in that conversation, it's kind of like a paper cut. I just start to cut away at it. And over time, you just lose that opportunity. And that's something we don't want to lose as parents.
The phones are getting in the way. They're not letting our children be vulnerable. They're getting in the way of our relationships. Tell us more about RO, Heath, and how does RO help with some of these seemingly very gloomy, sad situations?
Yeah. Well, one thing we realized early on when we started working on a solution was most families don't have a plan, right? We like to say a plan inspires confidence, right? At least a plan gives you an idea of how to approach a problem. And the problem today is that 91% of us keep our phones with us 24/7. And that's because we really haven't, by the way, that means most of us sleep with them at night as well, which is a whole different conversation. But that's because we haven't defined a place for them and we haven't defined sacred times to not have them. So RO really started as really focused on families to say, hey, let's define a place. Let's create this physical manifestation of your family's values that becomes the place in your home where you when you see it, it's starts the habit loop. You see a visual cue, but it becomes that thing that says, hey, this is almost calls out to you and say, hey, this is where your phone goes when you don't need it. So Aro is this beautiful, connected device. I'll call it a box for lack of a better word, but it usually, typically in our customers' homes, it lives in their family room or in the kitchen or somewhere in a higher traffic area. And again, it just becomes that symbol, that visual cue that, hey, you might not need your phone right now. And if you've set some rhythms and habits around your phone, it just makes it that much easier to put it down. That's the most basic aspect of it. We have an app that's connected to the device that starts to track all of your time, that you're being intentional and that you're without your phone. So it's this combination of, gamification, encouragement, nudges. Again, we're using technology to help you use less of technology. A lot of the same tips or techniques that social media does to keep you hooked, like streaks and badges and those types of things, we actually use to get you hooked on staying off your phone. And I think the important thing to communicate is, the goal is not to put the phone down, right? I mean, in some ways, that's the most basic part of it. The goal is, and the opportunity is what's on the other side of putting your phone down. So we've had Aro in the market for, I don't know, close to a year and a half, and 1.6 million hours of time logged. And what we're seeing is families have built not just a sacred place, but sacred rhythm. So whether that's a morning routine or family dinners or movie night without a second screen in their hand, or going, heaven forbid, going on a walk without your phone, or sitting on the back porch without your phone, just starting to realize the possibilities and the opportunities to do things without always being connected to the thing in their pocket.
So Aura serves as that physical visual cue that this is where my phone goes when I don't need it. This is where my phone goes when I might be wanting it, but I don't think I need it.
Yes, and the beautiful thing, it's like building any muscle, right? It's like going to the gym. The first time you pick up some weights, it's pretty tough, but after a couple weeks, after a month, you start to see the benefit. And it's like that with our customers. I mean, early on, there's a little bit of a, whoa, this is odd. I feel like I've lost my keys or lost my phone in today's world. And there are plenty of funny stories of people actually losing their phone and realizing they put it in RO. But um, point being is you start to build this beautiful, you reduce the dependence on this thing, and you realize one thing I realize, and a little bit self-deprecating, but I realize I'm not that important. We tend to think we're important based on the number of emails and texts and notifications we're getting. We're just not that important. The other thing I recognize is that this fear around getting the call, the emergency call, it's just such a low probability, and we've just gotten ourselves into such a tailspin on this topic that once you put your phone away for a bit, you realize that again, it's the emergency is likely not going to happen. But more importantly, I think as parents, we've been doing this wrong for a while, right? We've been modeling it poorly. Our kids then mimic our modeling when they get their own device, and then we get mad at them for mimicking what we've modeled. So the real opportunity, and this is where most of our customers land in terms of their stage of life, are for younger families who are the kids don't have phones yet, because they have the opportunity to see their parents for 5 or 10 years, even model appropriate behavior with this device, demonstrate to their children, hey, when I don't use this thing or when I don't need this thing, it goes here. And I was talking to a customer a couple of days ago, actually, and she said, "Ario changed my life." I said, "What do you mean by that?" She said, "Well, my husband and I are more connected. We're having more conversations than ever, and that's amazing." She said, "But my 2 and 4-year-old now put their toy phones in the RO box whenever we put our phones in the box." So think about that. You're creating that muscle memory in kids at a young age. So by the time, and again, who knows what the phone age will be at that point? Years ago when we started the business, it was 14. Now it feels like it's 11. But let's just say it's 11 or 12. They have 8 to 10 years of observing proper modeling, observing the right relationship, and even being part of that rhythm and that habitual opportunity to build a muscle that's going to just pay off for generations and generations.
I absolutely love the feedback from that family because that is pretty much what Aro does in my home. It has become a constant fixture in our kitchen. And as soon as I come home from work, my phone goes into Aro. I do
Mm,
not use the app, but I use it as a physical cue to put my phone. So if my phone rings, my children know where to grab my phone from. They know the box in which my phone sits. And Aro is a fantastic charging station for my phone.
yeah. Well, what's interesting is there's each of us have a drawer, a cabinet, a basket. There's something in our home that we could put our phones in, and we've had those for years. The reason we built an app is because most of us aren't disciplined enough to use that space. One, two is it's kind of nice getting credit for the time you put your phone away. So the beauty of the app itself is that it's tracking and it's reminding you, hey, you've done a good job, right? Like you said, and the way the app works, it allows you to tag your time. So whether it's again a dinner or a conversation, you can start to build this beautiful digital journal over time that says, wow, I actually spent 37 hours over the past 2 months, connected with my spouse or one-on-one time with my kids. So the physical cue is so important because to your point, I think it becomes part of a rhythm and a habit. But the app is a nice way to keep you motivated along the way, and also just to pat you on the back to say, "Hey, you're doing a great job."
It's an encouragement. So we talked about how Aro is suitable or geared towards younger families so that parents can model that behavior for their children for 5 to 10 years before children get phones of their own. Heath, what about workplace distraction where Aro might not be available as yet?
Yeah, what's really interesting. So when I thought of this idea, so I wrote I'll call it a business plan. It was more of just a rambling series of frustrations with my phone back in 2016. But originally, the idea was to have an RO in every conference room in America. And my thought was companies have so many unproductive meetings because we're all stealing glances at our phone during those meetings. I can't tell you how many times I was in a meeting at my last company where someone said, "No, what did we say? What did you just say?" And I was like, "Hold on, what were you doing?" Right. So I feel like there's an awesome productivity opportunity there. So let me tell you how we think about digital wellness. So we think about it in four pillars. One is self care. One would be family. One would be community, and then that fourth is productivity. And if you want to bucket that under work or maybe home productivity, whatever, but we bucket it under productivity. What we've done recently with the product, we actually so it used to be you could only start an RO, so what we call an RO session if you put your phone in the box. We recently upgraded the app so that you can start an RO session by flipping your phone over. And what's been interesting, even within the past month, we've already had 20 plus thousand of what we call these flip sessions. The number one tag for those flip sessions has been productivity and work. So people are taking this to the office. People are taking or using it at the office. People are using this in their home office. And I think it highlights the fact that we are now aware that distraction is a productivity killer. There's a researcher on the West Coast, Gloria Mark, who I think identified that it takes 23 minutes and 15 seconds to refocus after you're distracted. And my goodness, I mean, we're all continuously partially distracted when our phone's pinging at us all the time. So to answer your question, I think, we're making some product enhancements that can support, productivity specifically in an office setting. We're not going to build a bigger box. I don't foresee us building a bigger box, but I do think there are applications where it makes perfect sense. And we have plenty of customers who have a box at home, have a box at their office or in their home office, trying to integrate this across their life, not just when they're at home with the family.
Let's switch gears here a little bit, Heath. As digital wellness champions, Aro Freedom Foundation, there are lots of digital wellness coaches all over the world who are championing the cause of digital wellness through education, through awareness, through appliances, boxes like Aro, through apps. From legislature standpoint, Heath, what are some policies you would wish to see for the sake of humankind, particularly for the young people?
Yeah, well, I think it's a matter of time, first and foremost. many people have made the comparison of social media to smoking. And I think there's some relevant comparisons there. The difference was, and I forget where I read this recently, even when smoking was at its highest rate, the level of smoking across high schoolers was somewhere in the 40%-ish range. So let's call it mid 70s, early 80s. We're looking at 95+% of high schoolers now on social media. So there's a big distinction in terms of the adoption across the young age group, and that that goes down to middle school as well. So I think the only way for us to solve the social media conundrum is to have legislation. So I mean, at a minimum, I think we have to have an age appropriate introduction to social media. I mean, I've got two drivers right now and a third that turned 16 in a month. I certainly didn't give them the keys to the car on their 16th birthday and say, go figure it out. Right. And that's the approach we've been taking with social media. And I know it's hard. And I'm going to speak to parents for a second. I know it is hard because you've got a different app every month and it's tough to keep up with the technology, and you're trying to, limit features and limit time and all those things, but it is worth the investment. But it would be nice to have some help from, the government that says, hey, this is not appropriate for kids until, and we can debate that age, but the data is becoming pretty clear. Again, many people have recommended that, we start looking at age 16. There's other conversations on this topic around having phones in school, and there's just so much that we've learned. And I think it would be irresponsible, honestly, for us not to act now that we have the data that demonstrates how negatively impactful this has been on our kids.
It would be irresponsible to not act, given that the amount of data that we have collected over the last 10 years that clearly shows the negative impact of excessive screen time, social media, smartphones on the physical and mental health of not just kids, but adults as well. Awesome. Thank you so much, Heath. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and the work that you're doing. Where can people learn more about Odom and the work that you and Joey are doing?
Yeah, we've got our own podcast. It's called the RO Podcast. Joey is a terrific host. It's conversations with people who live with intention. So everything from professional athletes to authors to to therapists in between. So we do that weekly. Our website is goaro.com. That's goaro.com. We're on Instagram a lot. Again, that's our kind of target market in terms of young families. And our handle there is goaro now. So yeah, we're we continue to tell the story. It's fun now because we're past launch, so we have customer stories, not just our stories, and hearing those stories every week are kind of the thing that keeps us motivated. So it's been a fun journey. We're excited to hopefully make a small dent in this important topic.
Hopefully make a small dent in this important topic. That is what we all of us digital wellness coaches are living for. Thank you so much, Heath. Thank you again for being on Inspinar. It was a fascinating conversation, and I'm sure our listeners will take home important changes that they can actually implement in their day-to-day life. Thank you again for being here today.
Awesome. Thank you.
Let's reconnect with what truly matters. Let's reconnect with the real life. Let's reclaim our time and attention. Let's reclaim our productivity. Let's ungrip devices and grip life. I will see you next time.